Hi everyone, it's Lavely here with another video. This is gonna be a long one, so bear with me. I considered like shortening it and trimming it down, but ultimately it was just like, let's keep it the way it is. It's part of the journey, so come along with me. This might be one to put on in the background as opposed to sitting and watching it too closely. Also, I'm just filming a voiceover. I'm not planning on editing it. I'm just gonna sit here and talk for a while. But yeah, as you've probably figured out from the title, I am deciding, or have started, to make my own BJD, my own sculpt. I'm sculpting it, okay? I've been wanting to do this for a while. It's been a goal of mine, honestly, since I've started this hobby, and I've seen others try this, both physically like I am doing now or digitally. You might remember a while back I did try and sculpt digitally, although I kind of hit a wall when I realised I did not have the means to print it. I did also have an attempt with air dry clay, but that really ticked me off because it just dried far quicker than I was able to get anything I was happy with done. So yeah, this is take 2 with polymer clay. It's Sculpey, medium hardness, I think, or something like that. It's not the super firm stuff anyway, and as you can see, it's obviously grey. Great thing about this stuff is that it won't dry on me. The only way this is going to set is when I put it in the oven, so I have unlimited time to work on it to make sure it's exactly the way I want it. Now, I did look at it a couple of tutorials and things online, but I am really just figuring this out and fumbling around as I go. I saw someone else put like a wire inside the head. Not sure why they did it, but I did it, and I later found a fun like secondary use for that. It meant that I could like use it as a stand, so I didn't have to lie the head down, so that was quite handy. But yeah, so I covered my wire scrunch thing with tinfoil, probably too much tinfoil. Was I measuring the size of this as I went along? No, I wasn't. I kind of just eyeballed it, and yes, it did end up a little bigger than I would like it if then I would have liked it to. First step is I'm just covering it all with a thin layer of the clay. The point of the tinfoil is to save yourself from using too much clay. I'd say I probably still used too much clay. Not that it was too thick for it to like cure or set or whatever that's called, bake. That still worked out. But yeah, you'll see. The shape of my tinfoil thing kind of ended up like an egg. It probably would have been better off for it to be a circle with like another egg thing on the front of it, because heads aren't just ovals, team. They're not. And you'll see that this kind of frustrated me later and I did a thing, but yeah. Now, I can't picture things in my head. I have what people refer to as aphantasia, so like I literally was just making this up as I went along, putting things on, seeing what it looked like, thinking, oh yeah, it's missing something here, and altering it. I kind of rebuild this face a few times. I'm literally just putting clay on and then muddling with it and then rinsing and repeating until I was happy with it. I used my fingers initially. Kind of got sore thumbs, not gonna lie. This isn't the firmest of Sculpey clay, but still kind of like got to me. This is on 4 times speed, by the way, so apologies if it's a bit too much to watch, but anything shorter and we would have been here all day, okay, and we don't want that. So yeah, here are my sculpting tools. I got them in a set, literally a 3-pack, and they've all got like metal ball things on one end and then like a more silicone bendy, I don't know what it's called, like sticky thing on the other end. It's quite handy. It was the cheaper of my options and it gave me plenty of things to work with, so that's cool. And yeah, I just kind of work at it. I figured I'd start with the nose first since it was in the middle and just kind of went from there, because I don't know about you, until there are some features on here, it's really hard to know what looks good and what doesn't. Like, I'm that person who, when I'm drawing digitally, I'm going to move features around the face until I get them just right. It's a lifesaver being able to do that in digital work, but in real life it doesn't quite work like that, so yeah. I made holes in the eyes to the point where I reached the tinfoil in the middle. I thought that would help me save clay. I thought that would help me build it up, but I mean, very early days at this point. Gosh, when you see the head on its side now, you see that egg shape, and that's just not it. Anyway, yeah, so after putting the nose and the eyes on, the cheeks looked a bit gaunt, so I added some stuff on. This is a repeated process. My tools were really handy for smoothing in the clay bits that I'd added on. And yeah, I just kind of did this again and again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk through all of this process because, yeah, it was really just a lot of looking at it, squinting at it, turning my head to the side while looking at it, thinking, oh yeah, it's missing something, and adding more clay on. I did have a reference picture on my phone of like a human face that I was trying to kind of mimic or copy in a way. Because yeah, as I said, I can't picture this stuff, so I needed some kind of reference in front of me. Now, here you'll see me kind of like putting holes into my clay to put more clay on, because in my mind I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do to meld these clays together, since, like, you know, I'm putting a bit on another bit and I want it to stick. Like, imagine if it came apart after I baked it. That would be devastating. So in my mind, this was like gluing them together. I don't know if it was a good idea, because I did have one teeny little air bubble come up by the mouth, and it might have been from me doing what I'm doing now, which was just like, you know, stabbing stuff and putting clay on. Maybe not, but who knows. But yeah, as you can see, that mouth I just made, it's gone, because I've just decided now that the chin's not big enough. And I mean, because it's all very squishy, the more that I the more that I build on one place, the more that another place gets like squashed. I'm just adding more and more, and gosh, it looks like an alien. You really just have to trust the process, eh? Because it's not going to look magnificent straight away, especially if you're someone like me who is very inexperienced when it comes to this. I, of course, have my fair share of dolls that, you know, I see what they look like without face-ups on, but I mean, when it comes to actually doing this yourself, it's a whole other thing. Up until now, it's doing quite well keeping it in frame, but, you know, certain times call for like it to be closer to my head, so apologies, that does happen a fair amount. This isn't the only iteration of it where I will bring the head closer to my face to see it better. All of this footage, by the way, is about like 10 hours-ish, kind of smushed down to 1 hour, if that gives you any idea of like the parts I have cut out or opted not to film. I filmed them on my phone, which I thought was a great idea. Was able to set up a tripod with like a little phone holder thing to put my phone in, and that was cool. Except like my phone filled up with footage real fast, and it took me embarrassingly long to figure out why. So it was filming in 4K. Yeah, definitely didn't need to be filming in 4K, but it was. So I had to run everything through Handbrake, I think it's called, afterwards, so that I could actually have any chance of editing this on DaVinci on my laptop. Not on my laptop, on my PC. I'm editing on my PC now. Yeah, my laptop is literally, it's been on its way out for a long time. It would freeze often midway through editing something. It's an old MacBook. It's done me real good, and I've been meaning to like move on from editing on there. I had a few projects that were halfway through edited on there, and I was very scared. But I think I've since actually finished and uploaded all of those, so now if something does happen to it, I am safe, and everything on there is backed up, so we're good. But Yeah, even on my PC though, the hours upon hours of 4K footage were just too much. So yeah, I've since changed that setting and made it so it doesn't record in 4K, but anyway, I learnt my lesson, let's put it that way. But yeah, so you can see from like the amount of squishing and like shaping I've done, those eye holes I made, they're gone now. But it's fine, you know. I can still see a semblance of where they were, which helps me to, you know, have an idea of, you know, the face in general. I mean, that's all I was really after. It's like when you're drawing a face on a bit of paper or otherwise. It helps sometimes to kind of like plan out where things are gonna go so that you can have like the size be relative between stuff, if that makes sense. Maybe I just made that up, who knows. I don't really have a proper name for this head, by the way. I've been referring to it as Pebble, and actually that's the name I have for like the file that I'm editing this on. It's called Pebble Sculpt. I don't know if that's gonna stick, but the person who I'm modeling this after loosely, the head anyway, they go by Pebble sometimes, so I figured it's a good enough name for now. They're also grey, so I feel like it works. Now this person has the most cute little powdered lips, and they get like the most expression out of them and versatility out of it, and I figured these lips would be perfect for a doll, since depending on the angle you view it from, it could look happy, it could look sad, it could look pensive. It does mean teeth will be visible. I know people have mixed feelings about teeth being visible on dolls, but I thought it'd be a fun challenge, so I kind of go back and forth with these lips a fair amount. Yes, they very much look like kissy fish lips initially, and they kind of interfere with the nose. When you're sculpting stuff, initially things are gonna look bigger, okay, and then you just have to refine. I'm saying this like I know, but from my own experience, initially things look big. They just do. And then as you kind of add other stuff around, they blend in more to the overall piece. Like looking at this now and looking at like the finished sculpt I have here, I'm amazed it got from here to there. Mainly the head shape, that was the longest part that like took me to figure it out, and I mean, me working on the base I did wasn't really helping me. Honestly, if I'd made the base more of a circle, or even, yeah, more of a circle, it would have helped me out a lot. And yes, the wire coming out of the bottom does serve as a neck, but in the end, it's not really where the neck's gonna go, and I'm gonna have to cut that out because it's really not in the right spot. And I may or may not have to end up re-sculpting the back of the head, but I don't know if I can be bothered doing that yet. I don't know. We'll see, because now, I mean, present time, it's all baked and it's solid, and it just seems like a hassle, but we'll get there. I did this all in like the span of 2 days, I want to say. Most of my sculpting was done in the evening. I think it was a Friday night. I want to say 10 o'clock. I just decided, hey, I want to do some sculpting. I'd bought this clay last year. I'd bought this little sculpting kit last year and had best intentions of doing this, but never got there. And then I don't know what it was. I just literally stood up and decided it was what I was going to do. And I mean, I was motivated. I sat here for like, what, 10 hours. I figured out it was 10 hours, by the way, because you can't see it in like the filming thing now, but towards the left of my desk, I had my laptop set up and I had American Dragon Jake Long playing on it. And I calculated how many episodes I'd watched. And yeah, that's what it worked out to be, about 10 hours. So yeah, it was a long time. Does anyone else do that though? Like, have something that you've watched before? I mean, this definitely wasn't my first time watching the series, and I mean, I know enough about it and it's brainless enough that you can just have it on and not have to pay much attention. So like I was quite relaxed while I was just pottering away here. Time really didn't seem to matter. I just was working my way on this little alien looking thing. Oh my gosh, it looked like an alien. I don't know what I was doing. I thought these eyes were small at the time, okay? Look at how big they are. I mean, I was pushing them out knowing that they would be squished back in, but like, whoa, if this isn't a Martian, I don't know what is, especially considering the like lack of, this is gonna sound gross, but like flesh around the cheeks, lack of cheeks. There are no cheeks on this thing. It's just all head and then a V chin thing. It's literally an alien. Maybe I should call it alien instead. But yeah, I do see these like problems with it though, and eventually add more clay on and build on it and improve it bit by bit. It's just, you wouldn't think it takes this long, but it does. And I mean, maybe you do know it takes this long, but I don't know how the people who do this fast manage it. I mean, I guess with time you get better at it, but yeah. Look, here I'm even trying to add some like eyelid, eye bag, I don't even know what you call them, details. It's way too early for that, although I guess I've got the generic placement in shapes there. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I had an idea for the way I wanted the eyes slanted too, but what I'm doing here is literally the opposite of kind of what I wanted. They just kind of turned out that way. Look, this is when I figure out that I can use the wire as a stand too. Like, honestly, best moment. I felt very, very clever right then. And maybe that's what the people who have done this previously intended it to be for, but I haven't seen people use the wire that way, and usually they just have one bit sticking out. I had two bits and I could fold them, so it stood on its own. I thought that was pretty clever. But yeah, so here I am adding some cheekbones on because it just was looking too much like a Martian for its own good, as well as a bit at the top that would be a brow bone because the forehead slanted a bit too extremely and just something just felt off about it, and I thought this would fix it. It made it better, but I wouldn't say it fixed it because there was still something that I ended up resorting to later, but you'll see that all in good time. But yeah, the more I added, obviously the bigger the head got, until, I mean, it's big. I've not measured around the head, but I've held it next to my other dolls. Now my Jury 05 has a big head. It's probably the doll with the biggest head out of all of my dolls. This head is bigger. Not by a lot, but it is. Okay, here you see, this is what I had to resort to, okay, because it just wasn't right. The chin couldn't stick out much given like where it's the face sat, and the whole face needed to be lower. So I thought, feck it, I'm gonna cut it off. It looks so scary. I'm gonna cut it off and I'm gonna move it down. Actually, maybe that's where that bubble from the lip came from, because do you see that tinfoil I got rid of there, maybe? Oh, there's a helicopter. Don't know if that's gonna come up on my mic, but it might. But yeah, there was like a hole there. And I did try and build it up with clay, but, I don't know. It's fine, I can fill up the little hole anyway. But yeah, so in moving this down, all of a sudden, I had a lot more options. For one, the forehead, I mean, it looks more like a 5, 6, or 7 head right now, but like the shape of the head is a lot more realistic. I know the forehead looks big, but that's what it's meant to be like. That's what it's meant to be like. That's normal, okay? And as far as the chin goes, now it actually protrudes, it sticks out a bit more. Doesn't meld in with the head. So I was able to actually give them like a jawbone kind of ish. We had more space to work with. Do you see the problem with the wire now though? So in moving the head as I did, that wire now definitely very much was not in the right spot for the neck. It's kind of just sticking out the back of the head. But that's fine. I mean, I can fill it up, fix it up later, make a new hole, I don't know. I'll get there. I've also squished everything together, and in doing so ruined the eyes that I'd done, but that's fine. The face is looking very long at this point, but I just really wanted that chin to happen. I can always add more on later to give them some cheeks. I say them too because, I mean, the person I modeled them after is like, goes by she, her, but I feel like the sculpt in general could be kind of like androgynous, I don't know. I mean, it's just a doll head, you know, it could be what you want it to be. But considering I'm in the early stages of sculpting here, and I mean it's just a head, I feel weird giving it giving it pronouns. But yeah, look at me go. Those eyes I just made, gone. Let me just continue to push them out and cover them up and carve them out again. I don't know. The amount of times I tried to do these lips though, they went through a few iterations before I was happy, but you know, we did get there in the end. They always ended up like poofier and more pushy out. More pushy out, you know what I mean. They stuck out more like a fish initially, and then I would push them back. I don't know if it's the way I found the clay working for me, okay? In order to sculpt like the inside of the lips, for example, the best way I found to do that was to make the lips really big and kind of like pushed out, literally like a fish, and then kind of push the lips back in on themselves, because once those lips were pushed in, I could no longer reach those inside parts, if that makes sense. I really wanted them to have like a cute little nose with little nostrils, but I'm also a fan of like kind of bigger button-ish noses, so once again we went around and around with this a fair amount, and it was a bit of a battle to have it balance with the rest of the face. This is purely a personal project, by the way. I have no intentions of like selling her or anything. I just want to see if I can do this, and I mean, given it's my first attempt, I doubt it's going to be my best, so we'll see. I mean, I'm not gonna rule out anything, but for now this is just me having fun with clay and seeing what I can do. I tend to pick up projects and just kind of like stubborn my way through. I know that doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. It's like when I made my VTuber model, a lot of it was just, I want to see if I can do this. I want to have a project that's a challenge, that I have to kind of learn some new skills to figure it out, and I'll get something hopefully kind of cool at the end of it. This is this year's VTuber model, I guess. At the time I wasn't sure if I would do anything other than make a head. Of course, once I finished what this video shows, I realized that her head is obviously bigger than I kind of intended it to be. I was like, well, okay, shit. Maybe I should just kind of bench her altogether. My dream of kind of making a doll didn't necessarily extend to making a body, but like if I couldn't put her head on one of my bodies or easily like slot it onto somewhere, it's like, what should I keep going with her? Is she just a first practice? I don't know. I mean, she's not that much bigger, and I know that if and when you do cast a doll, they lose a little bit of their size, so I'm kind of holding on to that a little bit. That is the hope that when she's cast, or if she's cast, or I don't even know what I'm going to do with her, but you get my point. She's going to be a little bit smaller, which will compensate for her being slightly oversized. But also at the same time, I feel like that's wishful thinking, because there is no way she's going to lose enough size for her to be like directly comparable to my other dolls, or my other doll heads, but we'll see. Forgot the point I was trying to make, but I have started making a body. I've been filming it. We'll see how that goes. The body should be comparable to regular SD or 1/3 scale size bodies, but will also hopefully match with this head. So yeah, we'll see. Don't know how far I'll go with that. Time will tell. Honestly, this whole thing is just, you know, when you're when you're drawing digitally and you do a line and it's not quite right, so you go Control Z and then you repeat and it's not quite right and you go Control Z. You literally draw the same line about a bazillion times until you get a line that you're happy with, and then you accidentally undo that one too, and then you have to do it again. That's what this is. That's literally what this is. I mean, I would get things that I was kind of happy with, move on to something else, and then go back and have to tweak it again. Or maybe in the context of other stuff, things no longer looked right. One of the tools I have is kind of like a flat tool. Like it's not pointed, it's more like a flat brush, I guess, right? I ended up using that more than anything else. I found I was able to get into finer spaces with it, but also move the clay around quite easily with it. You can see here I was trying to move clay down to form more of like a brow bone kind of situation. Yeah, and look, those eyes, once again, smushed. Because, you know, in moving things around as I think I was causing some separation between the clay and the tinfoil underneath. I mean, I'd made holes in the eyes through the tinfoil, so it's quite possible there were some ear gaps in there. And I mean, I cut the whole face off and moved it, so yeah, I don't know. Gosh, these eyes though, I mean, they're huge. But they honestly didn't look huge to me at the time. I really should have had a at least one of my dolls directly next to me to be able to compare. I mean, they were literally just behind me on the shelf, they weren't far away, but I was so just engrossed in what I was doing that I didn't think to look. It wasn't until far later on where I actually was trying to put eyes into this head that I realized how big they were. Yeah, I didn't realize. I did not think they were as big as they were. So if I'm to do this again, which I'm sure I will have another go at making another head at some point, I'm going to definitely keep a closer eye on the eye size, because they didn't look big, but they were. They are getting slightly closer to the shape that I kind of was after though, so that's kind of cool. I wanted somewhat of an almond shape eye, slightly, like ever so slightly, like upturned, downturned, I don't know. I wanted them to have a slight slant on them just to kind of give some more dimension to the face. Also, it was so that it matched the reference more closely. So this is what it ended up like after my first night of sculpting. Pretty cool, pretty happy with it. The next day, which is what you're looking at now, I went on to continue, and straight away I figured this head was not narrow enough, so I tried to squish it. I am kind of limited by the tin foil inside, but I did manage to narrow it ever so slightly. And then, yeah, away I go again. Honestly, being able to sleep on this project and come back to it the next day was the best thing I could have done. I could have left it even more than that and worked on it across more days before baking it, but yeah, I mean, it meant that I could see imperfections and things that I had missed before. When you're working with something so closely for so long, you're gonna miss stuff, it's just natural. You'll see me turning the head upside down into the side a lot. It's not just so that I have a better angle because I'm right-handed at like working on things, it's also me trying to make things as symmetrical as I can. My husband was asking me like, how are you going to make this symmetrical? Like, I feel like that would be the hardest thing. And I mean, looking at the finished product now, there are some things I can see that aren't quite balanced, but I mean, it's pretty close and I feel like it adds a level of human to it. Yeah, also this is a 3D thing, so looking at it from multiple angles is going to help a lot. You'll see things that are not quite right very easily as soon as you turn it around. I don't know if you spotted before, looking at it from the top, like looking down, those eyes, not right. But I had a reasonable foundation, at least things were in an okay spot from the previous night. Cutting the face and moving it down was the best thing I could have done. It definitely made things feel a lot better from that point on. But yeah, so like I would check the profile, I'd check the view from the top, from the chin, from really all angles. You can see from this angle now that those cheekbones are a little bit too severe compared to the size of the head itself. All those things I would just add little bits of clay to. You can see me doing it here, like that chin. Yes, it was pointy, but there were not enough cheeks. So I'm adding cheek bits on, smoothing them on with this tool. It proved to be the best tool to do this with. Very handy. Of course my fingers help too, but something about this just like immediately merged the bits of clay together, which was very handy. But yeah, those eyes though, they look okay from the side, but as soon as you look at them from the top, the eyelids just stick out a little bit too much, and the bottom eyelid almost makes them look like a mask, and that's not really what I was going for. In a way, it's as if I had built the skeleton of this head and I was just adding like the cheeks and the flesh on. The nose is so like bubbly here, I love it. It definitely lost a little bit of that, but like it's still there. You'll see. It's not quite as exaggerated as it is here, I smoothed it a bit more, but yeah, I was really happy with the nose in the end. Looking at where I'm at with it now too, it's almost like the eyes are too close together. I definitely did fiddle with this more and kind of smush it a bit to move the eyes. But yeah, it's literally just look at it, fix a little bit. Look at it, fix a little bit. Just refine over time until eventually there's just not really anything you want to fix anymore and you're happy with it. Happy enough to bake it anyway, and then there's a whole lot of sanding ahead, which like I've only like just begun. I show a bit of it in this video, but like if I'm to do this properly, there is so much sanding ahead of me, like more sanding than sculpting for sure. It's just wild to me that like this project, I just all of a sudden decided I wanted to do it, and I've gone so hard on it already. And to go in this direction too, Can't say I knew what kind of doll I wanted to make like right off the bat. I just was like, oh yeah, this person has like awesome expressions and has a lot of like really cool outfits and makeup things they do. That would be fun for a doll to be able to get them to like do those styles and exaggerated looks. I like that. Let's give it a go. I didn't put the most thought into it, but to go from that to this, so like without thinking about it, like this head is kind of childish, I'll be honest. Not really what I thought I would make for my first head, but I mean, hey, it is what it is. And I mean, you could always style it to make it look more or less mature. I think this is the point where I'm like, oh yeah, those eyes are too close together. So I'm smushing the nose bridge, kind of like moving the eyes a little bit, realizing I'm quite limited on what I can do as far as just smushing them with my hands, but I figure it out. That's the tool I was talking about before. The one that's kind of like a flat brush, but yeah. Very handy for moving a lot of the clay around and smoothing things out too. So when pushing on the nose here, the eyes did kind of move a little bit further apart, which was handy. You know, things moving when I work on something else can be a detriment to what I want to do, but it can also help me in some ways. I did try take some still photos of this head throughout the process. I wanted to share it with some people, but no matter what I did, they didn't quite look right. And even now that it's not finished by any means, but now that it's in the state it is in currently, when I've tried to photograph it, maybe it's like the distance of the camera? I don't know, but when it's zoomed in, it's like that effect where the nose looks a lot bigger and everything looks kind of distorted. It's annoying. Maybe it's just I'm trying to tell myself it's the camera not doing it justice as opposed to the sculpt actually looking that way, because I swear they look a lot sweeter in person than they do on camera. For a while I considered making the eyes similar to my Jerry 05 just because I love that sculpt so much. Their eyes kind of have this permanent smile about them, where the lower lid is slightly scrunched, or not scrunched, but it's slightly closed, bent, I don't know, curved. It makes it look like they're smiling, and it's really sweet. So you'll see that kind of like line or contour, I guess, to the bottom lid initially, like that angle there, you can see it. It doesn't stay that way though. I end up like it just wasn't working with the overall face. Considering the mouth isn't that strong of a smile necessarily, it just didn't quite work out. And I mean, I wanted the mouth overall to look like it could be smiling or otherwise from different angles, so to have the eyes so strongly smiling wouldn't really have made sense. I kept on getting these weird like lines on the back of the head from me holding it. It took me way too long to figure out what was causing it. It was my rings. So in holding the head with my left hand and then moving it around, there would be these like indents on the back of the head, and yeah, it was from my rings on my fingers. So eventually I do take those off because I figure it out, but it took me way too long to realize. This big ball tool thing was very handy for smoothing things out. It also was quite handy for moving clay as well. I generally shied away from using the metal ends of these tools. They just were a bit too, I don't know, firm for what I wanted to do. I think they'll come in a lot more handy for sculpting the body, but as for this face, I found the silicone ones more manageable. Once again, I'm trying to like refine the overall shape of this head. The brow bone didn't really exist, and the whole head just kind of curved. So yeah, I wanted there to be a more distinguishable brow bone to forehead to head kind of transition. Once again, the eyes get very much squished in doing this. And they really do look like a mask. You know the ones I mean, right? Like, I want to say they're Shakespearean. Those masks that people use for theatre. Or the ones that are like, there's a happy one and there's a sad one. And they're often in posters and stuff. Anyway, here I make a more informed decision about the eyes. I actually cut away some clay with my craft knife. This is the knife I bought so that I could cut the cone of shame from the like smart doll heads that I have. Turns out it's also very, very handy for cutting through polymer clay. You'll notice that I cut these eyes to the outer edges as well. I don't want to cut them any further into the middle because they were close enough together as it was. I was really impressed at how clean the Standing Life made these lines, so I used it a little bit more for other things as well. It really felt like things were starting to come together at this point. I was quite happy with how the eyes were looking, the nose and the mouth were still the same from before, needed some refining but not too bad for how they are, and from multiple angles I was more and more happy with how this head looked. Don't ask me why I'm cutting even more out of these eyes. I mean, they're already big enough, but here I am making them bigger. I guess I was trying to make them even, and I think it kind of worked out, but still, they definitely didn't need to be any larger. Alright, now that the facial features were, for the most part, done, well, they're not done, let's face it, but you know, close enough, I was ready to make some ears. I had not made them up until this point because in holding the head I would have completely destroyed them, and yeah, it's easier to hold the head and work on the other features without fearing for the integrity of ears. So what I did was I broke off 2 little bits of clay and I made 2 ears as symmetrically as I could on the table in front of me. I did have a reference up on my phone. I wasn't sure how detailed I wanted to make these at the moment, but I had a rough idea for the size. Once I had my ears kind of sorted, I placed them onto the head as evenly as I could. Once again, this was easier said than done. I looked at the head from multiple angles to try and get them in the right spot, and it still isn't 100% right, but you know, it's close enough, and perfect symmetry doesn't look normal, so I'm just gonna pretend that anything that's asymmetrical is purposeful. So yeah, I use my favorite tool to blend the ears in. It was a lot easier to do this at the front of the ears than the back, because you know, I couldn't really easily get my tool in there to smooth the back without ruining the ear itself. But I did want to make sure they were stuck on, because no one wants ears that are going to fall off. I ended up finding a workaround by like rolling little bits of clay and like putting those behind the ears and then using my tool to smooth that down. I did use the smaller ball tool to try it, but it just wasn't really working and I could just feel these ears getting looser, so adding extra clay to smooth between them was the best option. As you can see though, in doing this I do have to support the ear with my finger, and that did, of course, kind of like lose some of the detail on the other side, so ultimately I had to re-sculpt them pretty much. Yeah, you can see there it's quite squished. My standing knife came in handy to cut out a bit at the top, and then I ended up putting like little snakes of like clay inside that part to make what was like, I don't know, ear anatomy. The little bit inside the ear, the details. You might remember the first, the digitally sculpted doll I did like forever ago. I gave them plugs. I considered that for this, but ultimately decided against it. Now that the ears are on, I can have a much better like appreciation of like the balance of the face as a whole. So immediately I could see that like the cheeks were even more gaunt than I thought they were, despite me having added a bunch to them previously, so that was something I built on. But also the lips weren't quite right. Now I could see the ears there, I was annoyed at the lips, so I went at them again, giving them more of like a little pouty look. I wanted to make sure the top lip was smoothed down, but the bottom lip was quite like pronounced, prominent, I don't know. There. They're getting pretty close to like done at this point. Not that I necessarily knew that at the time. I was quite scared actually of baking it in general, because how am I going to know if it's done? This is where leaving it for a day probably would have done me some good, but I sat there looking at her for a while and I was happy. I really couldn't think of anywhere I wanted to add anything. I figured I could always bake her again if I wanted to, and that, I mean, I might as well save my progress by baking. But yeah, here I am adding extra bits onto the cheeks to make them look a little bit more pouty, poofy, I don't know. I think it gives her more of a cutesy vibe, and it definitely matches more to my reference. Which, if anyone, I mean, I know I've been extraordinarily vague, but if anyone does happen to, for some reason, know of or recognize, I mean, you're probably more likely to know of them, you know, as in someone who goes by Pebble, as to like recognize them from the sculpt. I mean, I'll be impressed if you can recognize them from the sculpt. But yeah, do let me know. I may or may not be less vague in future, but it feels a bit weird considering like this is a real person I've kind of referenced. I don't know, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but it is what it is. So once I had added more to like under the eyes, the cheeks, the jawline, that kind of thing, I, smoothed it out and then added some more to like the temples and back of the head. Not sure if this was the best thing I could have done. I don't know. I talked previously about how the back of the head just isn't quite right because of where the wire comes out. Like I'm going to have to rebuild the neck anyway. I'm probably going to have to rebuild the back of the head too. It just isn't quite the shape that I feel it should be. I don't want it bigger, but I feel like it should be more of like a sphere as opposed to an oval. Maybe it was me wasting clay adding more to the back of the head, but it did make it look better overall, but considering I might have to redo it, might have been a waste of my time, who knows. When I was adding clay, I was really trying my best not to get air trapped under there. That was my biggest fear. I was like, oh my gosh, what if I bake it and she just falls apart like an onion? That would be terrifying. So like, I would go back and forth between like putting like score marks onto like the head and the clay I was putting on and then smushing it on, and then I'd try and like smush it from the center out, but then I always would break my rule and just kind of start blending it anyway. I don't know, there's probably a fair amount of air in here, but it's okay. Here she is in the oven. Oh my gosh, it looks very weird. They're just hanging out. But hey, look, that wire stand thing, it's doing its job. Once she was out, she was hot. I had to wait for a while for her to cool, but then I got out my sandpaper. Pretty sure what I'm using is P60. Yeah, I see that there. I have a few sandpaper options. These are just sandpaper pieces that I already had. Very convenient. And yeah, sanding. I did a very minimal amount of sanding. I probably could have done more, should have done more. I will do more, but I got sick of it. So yeah, very hard around the lips and stuff too. I didn't want to lose it. In the end, I decided it was time to cut her head cap off. I knew I would probably end up redoing this at some point, maybe anyway, but I still wanted to make sure I did it in a good spot. So I drew around where I wanted the line to be with a pencil first, and then very carefully started sawing away with this little saw. Once I'd gone around a fair amount, I got that Stanley knife back out again to finish the job. It cuts through this polymer clay very well, even when it's baked. It's probably not going to stay sharp for very long using it this way, but yeah, probably one of the most handy tools to have for this project. You'll see the head cap starting to release the more I go around, until eventually I can take it off. Ta-da! It's like an Easter egg, except inside it's just tinfoil. Oh my gosh, this tinfoil was an ass to get out, like seriously, a mess. You can see there's still a fair amount of it in there. I have a Dremel-ish thing. Very glad I had it. I wanted to sand out the inside enough so that I could put eyes into the head. So I didn't show a lot of it here. It created a lot of dust that was kind of gross. I put a towel down so that I could wipe it as I went along, but ultimately just ended up making lots of trips to my bin. But yeah, here's the head after the first pass of sanding, and with some eyes. These are the biggest eyes I own. Can I remember the size of them? No, but they're the same size of the ones that I've got in my Jury 05. So yeah, they're big. You can see the middle of that head is a mess. It is not very tidy in there, but hey, it's early days. I mean, I'm just glad I can have eyes in there. You can see that, you know, she still has a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a little air bubble by her mouth. There are parts that I've not been able to sand properly yet, but they are what they are. When I cut the head cap off, it did chip slightly, but, you know, I'm going to have to rebake her with some additions anyway. I don't know, what do you think? Overall, I'm really happy with her. I think she's really sweet. I can't help but just keep looking at her. I do really want her to have a body. I've started on that. I will document that process too. She is nowhere near done, like nowhere near. Not only do I have like mountains of sanding left, but there's also like surfacer that I bought to use to just, it's gonna be a journey. Come along with me. This video has been long. If you're still here, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And until next time, it's been lovely, and I'll catch you again sometime soon.